the basic reason why I share that story is just, you know, the whole reason why that fight even happened was because of all the things in the past that had built up to that point. All those grievances that both my brother and I had that we hadn't really forgiven each other on. You could say we haven't really moved forward. Um, that is World War One. I just, and there's so much more that goes into it. There's so much more that goes into World War One because we're talking about millions of people. But when you look at it kind of in just a simplistic way, that's what's there. This idea, like, people, just like these grievances, like, we need to get them. So, anyways, that being said, that's where we're going to move on into the story of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, because that type of sentiment is going to be played out in this story. So, like it says here, Serbia was in a stage of intense nationalistic feeling. Like, there's more to the story that I have not been able to go over with you just yet, so I need to explain right now, and that is, Serbia just gained its independence in the last couple of decades against the Ottoman Empire. They used to, for hundreds of years, have been part of the Ottoman Empire. And finally they have their independence. You know, that's definitely going to give you a major sense of nationalism. Like, we can do this. We're awesome. And look, we were looked at the little guy, you know, the underdog mentality. We beat the big dog, the Ottoman Empire. You know, and we deserve more even, you know, they're not the only ones, by the way. Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania had all gotten their independence from the empire. But there's one place that didn't. And I'm referencing it here a little bit. Go ahead, if you need to pause, go ahead and pause, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. There's an area in between Serbia and Austria that is called Bosnia. I had you find this on your maps. At least I had you find the city of Sarajevo on your maps that you did earlier. So the city of Sarajevo is the main city in this place called Bosnia. And both Serbia and Austria want it. It's kind of like land up for grabs. Think imperialism here. Austria's thinking, hey, we can be relevant again. We haven't really gained any territory since the days of Napoleon, basically, when we were basically reclaiming lost territory from him. That's about 100 years ago before this. Whereas Russia and Britain and Germany and France have gotten so much bigger. You know, we're feeling like we're being left behind. This is our time to shine and show we're still relevant in the world. We can still get territory, basically. The Serbians are thinking that should belong to us. You know, we're a brand new nation. We're awesome. Serbs are awesome. And oh, hey, look, 40% of Bosnia are Serbs. That's the largest group of people within Bosnia. But by the way, Bosnia, very multi-ethnic. So we deserve that. That's a nationalistic thing. That's like Serbian nationalism and imperialism combined together. They have the right to take that. But of course, Austria's the bigger guy, and they move in first and say, well, no, we're taking it, which just pisses the Serbians off to no end. Just pisses them off to no end. So this is when you start getting groups in Serbia. For instance, one we're definitely going to talk about, the Black Hand, where they start thinking, this is too much. You know, we need to do, someone needs to stand up and do something about this. Anyways, getting back to that in a little bit. So, in a gesture of goodwill, though, by the Austrians, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Crown Prince of Austria, is going to become the next emperor once his dad passes away. He decides to go down to Sarajevo to kind of give like a nice parade. Kind of this idea of saying, hey, Bosnia, we just annexed you, yes. Maybe you wanted to be your own independent country, but believe us, you're so much better off with us than you are, say, with Serbia or anybody else. You're so much better off with us than you ever were with the Ottomans. And we will have you as first-class citizens. You're going to be as good as any one of us. You know, welcome to the club type thing. You know, in this kind of new idea of just like the world will be a better place. So, the thing is that security back then just wasn't as good as you could say today. In fact, this is one of the reasons why we have, well, organizations like the Secret Service to protect the President of the United States. You just don't want these things to happen, because the group that I mentioned earlier, the Black Hand, was able to get a copy of the parade route of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, not just like a day before or a week before, but like 2 months before. They knew everything, and so like, this is our chance. We're going to teach those Austrians a lesson, which this part doesn't, like, looking back in hindsight, you're just like, what are you thinking? How does killing somebody, no matter how important they are, going to give you what you want? Like, since when is that going to tell the Austrians, oh, you killed our prince? well, I guess we should give you back Bosnia then. Sure, here you go. Like, it's kind of mind-boggling, but that's the thought process. Like, how dare you? We're going to show you, and we're going to make you pay. Kind of short-sighted in that idea. But that is the idea of the Black Hand. They're going to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and they do. Again, I'm assuming most of you know about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But I don't know how many of you have actually heard the story of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. I'll bring up both these pictures. So I'm going to give you the full story of how this goes down. Basically, in the planning for the assassination, the Black Hand, the Serbian nationalist, aka terrorist group, the Black Hand, have 4 assassins chosen. And these 4 assassins are going to be set up at different points around the parade route. And the idea is if one fails somehow or isn't able to do it, then hopefully the next person will. So they have 4 chances to get this done. So the last person who actually becomes the assassin, the 4th assassin who actually becomes the actual assassin, a kid, an 18-year-old kid named Gravili Princeps. I think I'm saying that name right. Gravali. Anyways, Gravili Princeps. He's the last one. The reason why is he's the youngest member of the organization of the Black Hand. And the thought was, hey, you have more of your life to live if you don't have to essentially do something that's going to... You're probably going to get killed over this, whether in jail or on the spot. Whoever does this assassination, you're giving your life for Serbia type thing. So they put him in last, just in case. Or, just, hopefully someone else gets Archduke before him. Although, I'm just told you he's the one, but here's how the whole thing goes. As the parade goes down, as Archduke Franz Ferdinand is going around Sarajevo and waving his hands at everybody, or waving his hand at everybody, saying, welcome to the empire type thing. They get to the first assassin, who was, I think, one of the older members, but he walks away. He chickens out at the last second. And it was learned later on the reason why is that he had a family. He just realized he just couldn't do it because he didn't want to mess up his family, basically. So he walks away. They get to the second assassin. The second assassin actually does attempt his assassination. He doesn't have a gun. He has a bomb, like one of those little Acme bombs, like off of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Just a little round black ball with a little wick on top. He lights it, throws it at the car, but he mistimed it, was probably pretty excited. It hits the car, bounces off, and goes into the crowd and explodes, killing a police officer. I think the only person that dies is the police officer, maybe more. I have to look this up. I'm not sure, but it does injure dozens more people. And of course, Franz Ferdinand just kind of blows his top a little bit. Understandably, someone just tries to kill him, but he gets pretty pissed off and just yells at the drivers and be like, hey, get me back to the hotel, things like that, because he's with his wife too, his wife Sophie. Both of them, just their lives were in danger, so they get back to the hotel as quick as possible. Of course, this means that the 3rd assassin and the 4th assassin, Gravili Princeps in that case, the 4th assassin, it's like, God dang it, he's not going to come by our area. All that planning was for nothing. So they both kind of go off in kind of a depressed mood. Gravili Princeps himself just ends up in a deli shop or a coffee shop of some sort, and he's just kind of like very much of a woe is me attitude for the next few hours. The thing is that when Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets back to the hotel, he kind of gets a hold of his temper and realizes that a lot of people just got injured, not necessarily because of him, but because he was the target of someone else's malfeasance, or basically what they were going to do, the bad things they were going to do. And so he's like, you know what, let's go visit those people. Let's go visit those people, because they'd set up like a field hospital, like a triage area, to help them out right there on the spot, because some of them were very badly injured. And so they decide to head out there. Now, of course, he doesn't just go out by himself. He needs to take his whole motorcade with him, his guards and everything. And they know that, hey, we're not going to take the same route. So everybody knows we're not taking the same route to get back there because there could be other assassins. So we don't want to let them know where we're at. So they decide to take another route. Problem is, they forgot to tell the lead driver. Again, there's a ton of conspiracy theories over this. I'm not going to delve into it in a short video like this, but just simply put, the driver of the lead vehicle, who everybody else follows, kind of like a herd of buffalo, doesn't get the message, doesn't get the memo. So he starts following the same parade route. Not supposed to do that. Now, one of the rear drivers starts recognizing this before anybody else, and it takes him a little bit to basically flag down the front driver and say, hey, stop. We got to stop. Or we're going on the dangerous route. We're on the normal parade route. So they actually do stop. They get the driver to stop. And it's just one of those hand of fate type of moments. But they stopped right in front of the shop that Gravelli Princeps was sitting in, kind of moping and all depressed about, oh, woe is me. We couldn't do it. This sucks. You know, I let down my friends and my country and stuff like that. And he looks up out the window and he sees Franz Ferdinand and Sophie right there in a stopped car. They stopped right outside where he was. He didn't even lose a second. He jumps up, runs out the shop, pulls out his pistol, and then shoots Franz Ferdinand and Sophie before anybody knows what's going on. He gets captured immediately, but the damage was done. By the way, if you didn't know this, Sophie also is killed in this. She actually dies before Franz Ferdinand. And one of the more ominous sayings of all time, and we look back at it today and we can chuckle a little bit because we're so much further, hopefully we're a bit further beyond this, but it is ominous at the same time. Ferdinand, who's just been shot, knows he's shot, looks over at his wife, not knowing that she is shot as well, and she most likely was dead at this point, and says to her, it is nothing. Basically trying to tell her and console her, you know, I'm shot, it's okay. You know, probably thinking that he would live. And then he dies shortly after that. But this is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The picture you see on the very right, that's an actual photograph of Gravelli Princeps being hauled away. Quite a famous photograph, if you can imagine. He dies, by the way, 2 years later in an Austrian prison of tuberculosis. Kind of, not, by the way, one of the more painful sicknesses to die from, if you didn't know that. So then we get into the declarations of war. Now, we're getting back to this whole idea of, like, why? Why did they want... Why? Why are we going to go into a massive world war when the crown prince of one country is killed by a minor country? Why can't they just solve this on their own? Well, it gets back to that whole concept of, that I told you that story about me and my brother over. You know, a lot of people are wanting this to happen, and then here's finally this excuse, you could say, to say, all right, now's our time. Now we have every right and reason to just pop them in the face. So, how to explain this? It's, another way to put this is, like, you have a fire ready to go. No one wants to be responsible for lighting the fire, but man, you did everything you could to pour kerosene on it and make it so the fire will easily light when it is lit. And this is it. Serbia, the little country of Serbia, or I shouldn't say just Serbia, I should say the Black Hand, tiny little organization within Serbia, lights that match. And everybody else is like, all right, light it. We're ready to go. Basically, and it comes down to this whole idea of, like, nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and tangling alliances. When the Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, the whole world's like, well, you guys need to settle your differences. But then Russia is like, you know, you better not pick on Serbia because we have an alliance with Serbia. But is Russia really there to help out Serbia, or is Russia there thinking that, hey, if Austria goes to war with Serbia and we help Serbia win, which we're easily going to be able to take out Austria, and from an Russian mindset, then maybe we actually annex Serbia and just say, you're our little brothers, and now you're part of a bigger empire that loves you, and oh yeah, now we have access to the sea, warm water ports in the Mediterranean that we've been wanting for 100 years anyways. And basically, screw you, Britain and France, over not letting us have those warm water ports. But yeah, there's a lot of thought process in Russia saying we can get a lot out of this. You know, that imperialistic mind is setting in. Austria, same thing. They're like, our crown prince was just killed. We won't just get Bosnia out of this. We're going to get Serbia out of this too. You know, we have every right to conquer them. How dare they? Like, what other thing could they have done that's even worse than killing our crown prince? We're going to go get them. Now, both sides knowing what's about to happen, that Austria is most likely going to declare war against Serbia, and that Russia is going to come to help out Serbia. Well, nobody's a dummy, especially not Austria. Austria's like, we can't take on Serbia and Russia at the same time. Heck, we'd have a hard time taking on Russia at the same time. But if we had Germany on our side, we could do it. So the Austrians go to Germany and basically say, we're declaring war on Serbia. will you back us up? Because we know Russia's going to get involved. And Germany basically says, yes, we'll back you up. Now, this could be seen as like, we're going to fulfill our promise type thing, which, yeah, is a good thing. But at the same time, Germany is looking for any excuse to start knocking down Russia and France, by the way. I'll talk about that in a second. Because they're feeling hemmed in on all sides. They feel like that Russia and France have been working against them for decades, if not hundreds of years in some cases. And then, by golly, we need to get them back, and we deserve a bigger empire than them because we're so much better. You know, remember that all those things build up over time, and it's like, here's that chance. So, basically, this is how it goes down. Austria gives an ultimatum, or like, it's like a term of surrender. It's not really that, but basically saying, Serbia, you have to do all these things in order to repent for what you did, basically. Serbia, when they get that ultimatum, is like, no, like, we'll do a lot of things for you. We understand, and we're sorry. By the way, the Serbian government was very sorry. Yeah, they're pissed off about Austria taking Bosnia still, but they never had any intention of causing this type of harm to Austria for that assassination to happen. In fact, as a gesture of goodwill, the Serbian government actually rounds up all the members of the Black Hand that they can find, and other people who were basically antagonistic towards the Austrians, you know, known terrorists, I guess you could say, or possible terrorists, and they give them to Austria as a gesture of goodwill, saying, here you go. We never meant this for to happen. We're sorry. Here are a lot of people that are that think the same way. Here's a lot of people that were part of that organization. Do what you will with them. We are sorry. But Austria doesn't care. They're smelling blood in the water. They're like, you know, essentially, in that ultimatum, they're basically turning Serbia into like a third party, almost like slave. I can't really say slave state. That's a bad way to put it, but that's what it felt like to the Serbians. Let's put it that way. There's no way they're going to accept that type of just. They just got their independence from Ottomans. Why would they then just give that up to the Austrians? There was no way they're going to accept it, and the Austrians knew that the Serbians wouldn't accept the terms of surrender or the ultimatum that they gave him. They were wanting to go to war. You know, this was the excuse. Of course, Russia comes in and tells Austria, no, you just declared war? Well, we're going to protect our little brother type thing. But of course, they're looking for imperialistic aims as well, as I explained earlier. They declare war, and then Germany comes in and is basically saying, nope, Russia, we'll honor our alliance against the Austrians. You leave it alone, or else we're going to go to war with you. And like, oh, dang it, France, we know that you are behind all of this anyways. This is all you're doing. In fact, we think that you even spurred on the assassination. You're the ones that helped the Black Hand out. Like, the Germany actually accuses France of essentially being the mastermind behind all of this. And they declare war on France as well. Now, whether Germany really believed that or not, again, it's up in the air. In a realistic mindset, it doesn't feel like it's up in the air. It's just an excuse. But anyways, technically it's still up in the air. But here's the deal, though. Germany isn't dumb. They know that once they go to war and put all of their resources and armies up against Russia, their back door's open. They're exposing their back to the French. And they know the French are going to take advantage of that, because 50 years before this, talking about things that happened in the past, 50 years before this, you have what's called the Franco-Prussian War, a war between basically Germany, or Prussia back then, but now Germany, and the French, where the Prussians win, or the Germans win, and they actually take territory away from France, a place called Alsace-Lorraine. The French really want that back, and they also want to prove that their army is better than the German army, because how dare the Germans have that idea that they're the best army in the world. We are. The French have always been the best have had the best military in the world. And they also know the Germans want to take some of their holdings over the world away, and they're like, nope, we're not going to let you. So yeah, the French, there's a lot of people in France, in the leadership of France, and the government of France is like, yes, when Germany goes to war with Russia, we'll find a way to declare war against them, to come to the aid of the Serbians and the Russians, because we do have an alliance with the Russians, so we can even just use that, and we're pretty sure the French people will go along with this. But when Germany actually jumps the gun and declares war on France in the first place, man, there must have been so many people in France just going, yes, 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 they did it. We don't even have to convince our people that we need to go to war. Germany already did it for us. And of course, it was a huge thing for the French. Like, the French people are like, how dare the Germans do this? And you have massive sign-ups for the military and things like that. A huge sweep of nationalism going through. The idea like, we'll protect our country type stuff going on. So France essentially gets what they want in the best situation they can ask for it. Now, the last person to talk about here is Britain. Britain gets involved not because they have an alliance with France and Russia, which they do. Britain actually really doesn't have any intention of helping those two countries out if it doesn't help them out. But the reason why the British want to take on the Germans and why they're like, we need to get in this fight, because they're very much afraid of the German Navy, which has just barely been built, and it's a Navy that could stand up to the British Navy potentially. It's not as big as the British Navy, but it's the biggest Navy in the world, or the second biggest Navy in the world aside from the British. And the British are going to be a bit scared of what the Germans are doing. And so if they have the excuse to kind of pound the German Navy into the ground because they'd have the help of the French and the Russians, the two other big nations of the world at the time, well, this would be a cinch. Basically, Britain, France, and Russia beating up on Germany. We can do this. It'd be hard for one of us to do it on ourselves, but all three of us together, we can beat Germany down and we'll get what we want. But Britain is in more of a precarious situation because they can't go to the British people and say, all right, there's a war going on and we have an alliance with the Russians and the French and we have a duty to honor it. Basically, especially when it comes to the French, if you don't know the history behind the English, the British, and the French, it is not a happy one. Like they have gone to war with each other so many times over the last few hundred years leading up to this point that they're not nice with each other. So even today, at least I hope it's nice today. From what I know, it's nice today, but they still take shots at each other today. It's quite comical actually, today at least. But back then, there's a lot of animosity between the British and the French. It's like, no, not going to help them out. And why? No. This is their war type thing. You weren't going to get the British people on board. But Germany decides to invade a country called Belgium. And the reason why is Belgium is in between France and Germany in a way. Germany and France actually share a border. And again, I hope you guys remember your maps that we did. But there's Belgium a little bit north of that. And Germany realizes, hey, if we can kind of sneak attack across the Belgian border into France, and maybe the French won't see it coming, which they don't, by the way. We'll get into that one in the next lesson. But the German government actually goes to the Belgian government and asks and says, hey, we really want to move troops through your land. We mean you no harm. Just let us through. Let us use your railroads for a little bit. It won't take long, just a week or two, and we'll be out of your hair. And the Belgians say, no, you can't come through. We don't want any part of this. And the Germans are like, well, you need to. You just need to. Let us through. And the Belgians are like, nope. So the Germans are like, all right, we're plowing our way through. Like, this is part of the plan. We actually planned for the idea that you might say no, so we're actually going to conquer you as well. And so you actually have a war startup between the Belgians and Germans before the Germans get to France, actually. And this gives the British an excuse, saying, we have an alliance with the Belgians. They're a little guy. We have a solemn duty as kind of like a big brother, kind of like the Russians to the Serbians. We have this duty as a big brother to go help them out. And look at how dare they? And the British people do get on board with that one, and they're just like, no, that's not cool. You can't do that. So off to war they go, and that's the setup for World War I right there. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about, and then we'll be done with this lesson, is the mindset of everybody going into this. Yes, there's millions of soldiers right from the get-go with this war, but no one goes into this almost everyone goes into this thinking this will be they go into this with the thinking that this will be a short war. This will be over by Christmas. By the way, it starts like in August of 1914. But this will be over by Christmas, maybe even earlier. A few thousand people will die on each side. We'll toast to their memories. But this is going to be a jolly good war. This is going to be a fun time. In fact, a lot of people sign up for the military because they're actually they're looking forward to actually leaving their homes and getting an adventure in life versus just staying in one spot their whole lives. Why read a book when you can experience what's in the books type thing? Well, for those that could read at this time. But it's just this sense of adventure is definitely taking hold. Is definitely taking hold. On all sides. For the Russians, the Germans, the Austrians, the British, and the French, it's taking hold of everyone. No one really sees what's about to happen except for a few people. And just a quote from one of these guys, who actually is the head of the armed forces for Britain. And everybody laughs at him over this, but this becomes a very, again, ominous type of saying or quote, only because in hindsight we can look back and see this. But a guy named Lord Kitchener said, hope I'm saying his name right, but basically says, this war is going to be won with the side that has the last million men left standing. Which was just, I mean, no war in human history has ever seen the deaths of millions or tens of millions before. No one, everybody just laughed at him. It was like, you're dumb. This will be over quickly. We're so much better than the other side anyways. So, but that became not just ominous, but that became a bit prophetic. In the idea that not everybody died in World War I, but again, 22 million people died in World War I. But it did come down to the side that got the last million men. Didn't mean they're the last million men left standing. You could say the last fresh shed of reinforcements, the last bit of guys to be had in this war, was when the Allies were able to get 1 million Americans on their side. And those 1 million Americans did turn the tide of the war and win it. So we'll talk about that when we get there. But that's how this war starts. That's how it all comes around. Anyways, we'll stop there and go along with that.